Vexrani spent 3 days watching the human. He followed her through the winding corridors of Verath Prime, always keeping his distance, always staying in the shadows. He watched her attend meetings with alien diplomats. He watched her eat meals at small restaurants in the station's commercial district. He watched her laugh with her assistant, a human female named Lisa Brennan, who walked with the quiet confidence of someone who knew how to fight. And the more he watched, the more confused he became. Kira Dawson did not act like prey. She walked through the station with her head high and her shoulders relaxed, as if she had nothing to fear from anyone. She made eye contact with strangers. She smiled at people she did not know. She moved through crowds without checking over her shoulder or scanning for threats. It was either incredible bravery or incredible stupidity. Vexrani decided it was stupidity. The humans had a small security detail, led by a male named Derek Cole. He was tall for a human, with gray in his hair and old scars on his hands. Vexrani studied him carefully and found nothing impressive. The human moved slowly compared to a Tolvaxian. His reflexes were dull. His senses were weak. This would be easy. Vexrani decided to start with poison. It was clean, quiet, and left no evidence. He acquired a vial of Nexari venom from a dealer in the lower levels, a substance so deadly that a single drop could kill a Varath warrior in minutes. He paid extra for a formula that was colorless and tasteless. The opportunity came at a diplomatic reception 3 nights later. Kira Dawson stood near the refreshment table, talking to a group of Maluvian traders. A drink sat unattended on the table beside her. Vexrani moved through the crowd like smoke, his scales shifting color to blend with the dim lighting. He passed by the table, and his hand moved faster than any eye could follow. A single drop of Nexari venom fell into the glass. Then he retreated to a corner and waited till Kira picked up her drink a few minutes later. She took a sip, paused, and frowned slightly. "This tastes a bit off," she said to Lisa Brennan. Vexrani felt his heart race with anticipation. The venom would already be entering her bloodstream. In 30 seconds, she would feel dizzy. In 60 seconds, she would collapse. In 90 seconds, she would be dead. Lisa Brennan took the glass and sniffed it. "Probably just a bad batch. Want me to get you another one?" "No, it's fine," Kira said. She drained the rest of the glass in one long swallow. Vexrani watched her. 30 seconds passed. She kept talking. 60 seconds passed. She laughed at something the Maluvian traders said. 90 seconds passed. She excused herself and walked across the room to greet another group of diplomats. She was not dead. She was not even sick. Vexrani stared in disbelief. He had watched her drink the poison. He had seen it enter her body. The Nexari venom should have killed her a dozen times over. It should have stopped her heart and dissolved her organs from the inside. But she was fine. She was more than fine. She was walking around the reception as if nothing had happened. He left the party in a daze and returned to his rented quarters on the lower levels. For hours, he searched through databases and medical records, trying to understand what had gone wrong. The answer, when he found it, made him feel cold. Humans were resistant to most poisons. Their bodies had evolved on a death world where toxic plants and venomous animals were everywhere. They had developed livers that could filter out substances that would kill other species in seconds. They consumed alcohol, actual ethanol, for recreation. They ate capsaicin, a chemical weapon that most species use for self-defense. They drank caffeine, a stimulant that could stop a Tolvaxian heart. The Nexari venom had done nothing, because Kira Dawson's body had simply processed it like any other mild irritant. Vexrani sat in the darkness of his quarters and felt the first real thread of doubt enter his mind. But he pushed it away. Poison had failed, but poison was for cowards anyway. He was a warrior. He would kill her the old way, with his claws, and his speed, and his strength. He spent the next 2 days planning his attack. He studied the maintenance corridors beneath the diplomatic sector, mapping out routes and escape paths. He identified a section where Kira Dawson walked alone every evening on her way back from the ambassador's quarters. The corridor was narrow and poorly lit. There were no cameras, no witnesses. It was perfect. On the third night, Vexrani waited in the shadows. His claws were extended. His muscles were coiled and ready. He had killed dozens of targets in exactly this way. A quick strike from the darkness, a slash across the throat, and then gone before the body hit the ground. He heard footsteps approaching. Soft, steady, unhurried. The human had no idea what was waiting for her. Kira Dawson turned the corner, and Vexrani struck. He moved faster than any human eye could follow, his claws aimed at her throat. This was the moment of victory. This was the end. But Kira Dawson was not where she was supposed to be. She had moved. Not fast humans could not move fast, but she had moved at exactly the right moment, turning sideways so that his claws passed through empty air instead of her flesh. And then she hit him. Her fist connected with his jaw, and Vexrani felt something crack. Pain exploded through his skull. He staggered backward, shocked. How had she seen him coming? How had she known? But there was no time to wonder. The human was already moving again, her body shifting into a fighting stance that he recognized from a dozen warrior cultures. Her eyes were calm. Her breathing was steady. She was not afraid of him. "You're the one who poisoned my drink," she said. It was not a question. Vexrani snarled and attacked again, his claws slashing through the air in patterns that had killed Vorath warriors and Drennic soldiers. She should not have been able to dodge them. She should not have been able to block them. But she did. She took hits that should have stopped her. He felt his claws tear through her arm, drawing blood. But she did not scream, did not freeze, did not fall. She just kept fighting. Vexrani had never seen anything like it. Every other species had a pain response, a moment when the body shut down to protect itself. Humans did not have this. Humans could keep fighting through injuries that would have left anyone else helpless on the ground. Kira Dawson grabbed his arm and twisted. He felt the bone snap, and this time it was his turn to scream. He ran. He fled into the darkness of the maintenance corridors, clutching his broken arm to his chest, his mind spinning with shock and fear. Behind him, he heard voices. Human voices. More of them were coming. Vexrani had made a terrible mistake. The prey had become the hunter, and the hunt was just beginning. The Great Hall of the Galactic Council had never been this quiet. Representatives from 12 different species sat in their designated seats, their faces showing fear that none of them wanted to admit. The holographic display in the center of the room showed a map of the outer territories, and the red zone's evolutionary expansion grew larger with each passing week. Ambassador Lyra Venn of the Taloran Collective stood at the speaker's platform. Her silver skin reflected the blue lights of the chamber as she addressed the council. The Vuggery Dominion has taken 14 colony worlds in the past 3 months. Their slave ships now hold over 2 million captured civilians from 6 different species. Our combined fleets have failed to stop their advance. Murmurs spread through the chamber. The Vexari were not just conquerors. They were slavers who viewed other species as property. Their warriors stood 7 feet tall with natural armor plating on their bodies. Their ships were fast and heavily armed, and their cruelty was legendary throughout the galaxy. High Counselor Zethrak, an elderly Morvian with pale blue skin and tired eyes, raised his thin hand for silence. He had served on this council for over 60 years. He had seen wars begin and end. He had watched empires rise and fall. "What options do we have remaining?" he asked, his voice weak but steady. "Very few," Ambassador Venn replied. The Vaxari fleet outnumbers our combined forces 3-1. Even if we gathered every warship from every member species, we would face certain defeat in open battle. In the corner of the chamber, almost forgotten by the other representatives, sat Commander Jack Morrison. He was the human military liaison to the Council, a position that most species considered ceremonial. Humans had only joined the galactic community 50 years ago. They were seen as young, primitive, and unremarkable. Their military was adequate for defense, but nothing special in the eyes of the elder races. Jack listened to the debate without speaking. He was a tall man in his early 50s with gray hair cut short and a face marked by old scars. His uniform was simple and dark, without the decorations that other species wore to show their status. He had learned long ago that silence often revealed more than words. "Perhaps we should consider negotiation," suggested Representative Koth of the Velian Trade Union. "The Vexari may accept territorial concessions in exchange for peace." "They do not want territory," High Counselor Zethrak said sadly. "They want slaves. They want to watch other species kneel before them. There is no negotiating with such hunger." Ambassador Venn turned her attention to Jack Morrison. "Commander, what resources can Earth contribute to this crisis? We need every ship available." Jack stood slowly. "Earth can provide 37 combat vessels and supporting craft. They will arrive within 2 weeks if the Council requests them." 37 ships, Ambassador Venn repeated with barely hidden disappointment. "That is helpful, but it will not change the outcome of this war." "No," Jack agreed simply. "It will not." He sat back down, and the Council moved on to other matters. But High Counselor Zethrak watched the human commander with curious eyes. The old Morvian remembered something from many years ago. A story told to him by a dying friend who had witnessed something impossible during the Kreth Rebellion. When the session broke for rest, Zethrak approached Jack Morrison in the hallway outside the chamber. The human stood by a window, looking out at the stars with an expression that the Morvian could not read. "Commander Morrison," Zethrak said softly, "may I speak with you privately?" Jack turned and nodded. "Of course, High Counselor." The old alien glanced around to make sure they were alone. "I am very old, Commander. I have heard many stories in my long life. Most of them were lies or exaggerations. But some stories appeared too often from too many sources to be entirely false." Jack's expression did not change. "What kind of stories?" "Stories about human soldiers who are different from the others. Soldiers who move through shadows like they are made of darkness. Soldiers who end wars overnight and leave no trace of how they did it." Zethrak paused. "I was told these stories are myths. Propaganda designed to make enemies fear humanity. But I have wondered for many years if the myths might be real." Jack remained silent for a long moment. Then he said, "Myths are powerful things, High Counselor. Sometimes it is better to leave them unexplained." Before Zethrak could respond, an alarm echoed through the corridor. Emergency lights flashed red as a voice announced over the communication system. "Priority distress signal received. Civilian Station Harmony 7 under attack. 40,000 refugees aboard. Vexari assault fleet surrounding the station." Jack and Zethrak hurried back to the council chamber, where chaos had erupted. The holographic display now showed a small station surrounded by over 40 Vexari warships. The station's shields were failing. Its few defensive weapons were useless against such overwhelming force. "How long until our nearest fleet can arrive?" Ambassador Venn demanded. 3 days at maximum speed," a tactical officer reported. "The Vexari will breach the station within 18 hours." Silence fell over the chamber. 40,000 civilians, including thousands of children, would become slaves before help could arrive. The math was simple and terrible. Jack Morrison quietly stepped away from the crowd. He moved to a private communication terminal in the corner of the room. No one noticed him. No one ever noticed the human when important things were happening. He entered a code that existed in no official database. The screen flickered and a single word appeared. Ready. Jack typed his response. Nightfall protocol authorized. Station Harmony 7. 40,000 civilians. 18-hour window. A reply came back in seconds. Confirmed. Team deploying. 16 hours. Jack deleted the conversation and returned to the council chamber. The representatives were still arguing about impossible options and hopeless plans. He resumed his seat in the corner and said nothing. High Counselor Zethrak noticed that the human commander's expression had changed slightly. There was something in his eyes now. Something that looked almost like hope. Or perhaps it was something darker. Perhaps it was the look of a man who had just released something terrible into the galaxy. The old Morvian thought again about the stories he had heard. Ghost soldiers. Shadow warriors. Myths that enemies prayed would never become real. He looked at Jack Morrison and wondered what the humans had truly been hiding all these years. Somewhere in the darkness between stars, a ship that appeared on no sensors changed its course. Inside, 6 figures began preparing for war. They did not speak. They did not need to. They had done this many times before. The galaxy believed they were legends. The galaxy hoped they would remain legends. The galaxy was about to learn the truth. The ship had no name painted on its hull. It did not appear in any military registry. Its design was unlike any vessel in the known galaxy, covered in material that absorbed light and signals alike. To sensors, it was invisible. To the eye, it was a shadow moving through shadows. Inside, Master Sergeant Danny Cole studied the mission briefing on a small screen. He was 46 years old, with a face that looked older. His hands were steady, covered in small scars from decades of combat. He had served in Nightfall Division for 20 years, longer than anyone else still breathing. 40 Visari warships, said Sergeant Kate Reyes from across the narrow compartment. She was checking her weapons with practiced movements. 6 of us. Someone in command has a sense of humor. Could be worse, replied Corporal Sam Nguyen without looking up from his equipment. He was the youngest member of the team at 32, responsible for technology and explosives. Remember the Kepler station job? 60 ships and only 4 of us. We had better intel on Kepler, Kate said. Danny set down his screen and looked at his team. Besides Kate and Sam, there was Sergeant Ben Howard, a massive man who specialized in heavy weapons and close combat. His size made him seem slow, but Danny had seen him move faster than anyone when lives were at stake. The final team member was Dr. Laura Chun, their intelligence coordinator. She rarely went into direct combat, but her analysis had saved their lives more times than Danny could count. Listen up, Danny said, and the quiet conversation stopped. The target is the Vexari command carrier at the center of their formation. War Marshal Krethvax is aboard. He commands this entire assault fleet. We remove him and his senior officers. The fleet loses coordination. That gives the civilians a chance. Rules of engagement? Ben asked. Total silence until we reach the command deck. No witnesses, no alarms, no evidence we were ever there. By the time they realize what happened, we need to be gone. Lavra pulled up a holographic display of the command carrier. It was enormous, over 2 kilometers long, designed to intimidate as much as to fight. Entry point options are limited. The Vexari use heavy armor plating on all external hatches. However, their waste disposal system vents directly into space on the lower hull. The opening is small, but it should be passable. Kate raised an eyebrow. We're going in through their garbage? It's the one place they won't expect an assault, Lava replied. Vexari psychology cannot comprehend that anyone would choose such an entrance. It violates their sense of warrior honor. Danny nodded. Human history is full of victories won by doing what the enemy thought was impossible. Or disgusting. We use every advantage. The ship shuddered slightly as it dropped out of faster-than-light travel. Through the small viewport, they could see the distant lights of the Vexari fleet surrounding the civilian station like predators circling wounded. Sam moved to the pilot's console. We're at the edge of the system. No detection so far. I'm plotting an approach using the asteroid field for cover. We'll reach launch position in 4 hours. 4 hours. Danny used the time to review every detail of the mission with his team. They studied the layout of the command carrier, memorized patrol patterns based on Laura's analysis, and identified primary and backup targets among the Vexari officers. During a brief rest period, Kate sat beside Danny in the dim compartment. 20 years, she said quietly. How many missions? I stopped counting after 100, Danny admitted. Does it get easier? No, it gets familiar. That's not the same thing. Kate was silent for a moment. The Council doesn't even know we exist. We save their people, protect their worlds, and they think we're stories to scare children. That's the job, Danny said. We don't do this for recognition. We do it because someone has to. Because 40,000 people on that station are going to die unless we stop it. And if we fail? Danny looked at her with eyes that had seen too much death. Then we make sure our failure costs the enemy more than they can afford to pay. The 4 hours passed quickly. The ship glided through the asteroid field like a whisper, invisible to the Vexari sensors sweeping the area. When they reached the launch position, the team gathered in the small airlock. They wore armor unlike anything the galaxy had seen. Matte black, absorbing all light. No reflective surfaces, no identifying marks. The helmets covered their faces completely, displaying tactical information on internal screens. Each suit was equipped with sound dampeners, thermal masking, and enough weapons to start a small war. Danny looked at his team. These were not just soldiers. They were the product of humanity's long and violent history. On Earth, humans had spent thousands of years fighting each other. They had developed skills and tactics that peaceful alien species never needed to learn. When humanity finally reached the stars, they brought those skills with them. Most humans were kind and diplomatic. They wanted peace and cooperation with their galactic neighbors. But they also remembered their past. They remembered that sometimes peace required people willing to do terrible things in the darkness so others could live in the light. Nightfall. The vision was made of such people. Final check, Danny said. Weapons. Green. Each team member responded. Communications. Green. Extraction protocol. Confirmed. Danny opened the airlock. The cold void of space waited outside. In the distance, the massive shape of the Vexari command carrier blocked out the stars. 40,000 innocent people were counting on them without even knowing they existed. Nightfall protocol is active, Danny said. Move out. One by one, they launched into the darkness. 6 shadows against the infinite black, falling toward a ship full of enemies who believed themselves invincible. The Vexari had conquered dozens of worlds. They had never been defeated in battle. They had heard rumors of human ghost soldiers and laughed at such obvious propaganda. They were about to discover that some propaganda was based on truth, and by the time they realized their mistake, it would be far too late. Fire and chaos consumed the command carrier. Explosions ripped through corridors as Sam's charges detonated in sequence, destroying critical systems throughout the ship. Vexari soldiers ran in every direction, their discipline shattered by the death of their leaders and the failure of their weapons. Danny and Lara fought through the madness toward the extraction point. Every step was a battle. HFY warriors attacked from every direction, desperate and furious. Danny's ammunition ran low, then empty. He switched to his blade and kept fighting. Laura took a wound to her leg but refused to slow down. She had studied human military history for years, learning how their ancestors had survived impossible situations through sheer determination. Now she understood that those stories were not exaggerations. The will to survive was burned into human nature. They reached the shuttle bay to find Kate waiting for them. She was covered in blood, most of it not her own. Her armor was damaged, her breathing was ragged, but she was alive. "Sam?" Danny asked. "Already at the ship?" "He's hurt but functional." Kate looked behind Danny. "Where's Ben?" The silence answered her question. "We have to go," Lavra said softly. "The carrier is breaking apart. We have maybe 3 minutes." Danny stared back at the corridor they had come through. Somewhere in the burning wreckage, Ben was either dead or dying. There was no time for rescue. No time for goodbye. Only the mission remained. "Move," Danny ordered. They ran across the shuttle bay as the ceiling began to collapse. HFY shuttles exploded around them, their fuel igniting from the spreading fires. The stealth ship waited at the far end, its engines already warming up. Sam sat in the pilot's seat, one arm hanging useless at his side, his other hand working the controls. The team climbed aboard as the first section of the shuttle. They fell into the flames below. Sam launched the ship without waiting for them to strap in. The acceleration threw them against the walls, but the pain meant nothing compared to escape. Behind them, the HFY command carrier died. Its spine broke in 3 places, spilling fire and debris into space. The other ships of the fleet scattered in confusion. Their commanders gone, their weapons offline, their coordination destroyed. On the civilian station, 40,000 refugees watched through observation windows as their executioners fled in chaos. They did not understand what had happened. They only knew that death had been certain minutes ago, and now they were alive. A child pointed at the fleeing HFY ships. "Mommy, why are the bad ships running away?" Her mother held her close, tears streaming down her face. "I don't know, sweetheart. Someone must have saved us. Who? I don't know." The stealth ship limped away from the battle zone, invisible to the sensors of both the fleeing HFY and the approaching Council fleet. Inside, the surviving team members sat in exhausted silence. Kate cleaned her wounds with mechanical movements. Her hands were steady, but her eyes were distant. She had killed the war marshal, ended the threat to thousands of innocent people, and lost a friend in the process. Victory and grief mixed together until she could not tell them apart. Sam programmed the autopilot with his remaining good hand. "We'll reach the rendezvous point in 6 hours. Medical team is standing by. Ben's transponder?" Danny asked. Sam checked his console. The screen showed a flat line. "Signal lost." "He's gone." Danny closed his eyes. Ben had served in Nightfall Division for 12 years. He had saved Danny's life at least 4 times. He told terrible jokes and made the best coffee on any ship he served on. He had a daughter on Earth whom he had not seen in 5 years because the mission always came first. Now he was debris floating in the wreckage of an alien warship. "We'll report him as missing in action," Danny said finally. "Standard protocol? His family?" Lavra asked. "They'll receive the notification. They'll never know what really happened. They'll never know he died saving 40,000 lives." Danny's voice was flat, empty. "That's the job." The hours passed slowly. The team received medical treatment from the ship's automated systems. Kate's ribs were cracked. Sam's arm was broken in 2 places. Laura's leg wound was deep but clean. Danny had so many small injuries that he had stopped counting, but they were alive. And because they were alive, the mission was a success. As they approached the rendezvous point, a secure transmission arrived. Danny read it alone in the cockpit while the others rested. Nightfall team. Civilian station secured. Council fleet arriving. Vexari forces in full retreat. 0 civilian casualties. Mission successful. New assignment incoming. Details to follow. New assignment. Another impossible mission. Another group of innocent people who needed saving. The war against darkness never ended. It simply moved from one battlefield to the next. Danny deleted the message and stared at the stars. Somewhere out there, the Galactic Council was probably celebrating their fortunate victory. Politicians would take credit. Admirals would write reports explaining how their strategic decisions had saved the day. No one would mention the 6 soldiers who had actually done the work. That was fine. That was how it had always been. Humans had learned long ago that true strength did not need recognition. The greatest warriors in human history were often forgotten by the people they protected. Their names faded from memory, while their deeds lived on in the safety and freedom of future generations. Nightfall Division was the continuation of that tradition. They fought in the darkness so others could live in the light. They died in secret so others could die of old age surrounded by family. They were the monsters who hunted other monsters, and the galaxy would never know their names. Kate appeared in the cockpit doorway. Danny, you should sleep. Can't, too much in my head. She sat down beside him. Ben knew the risks. We all do. It's the price we pay. I know. Danny was quiet for a moment. 20 years I've done this. How many friends have I lost? How many letters have I written to families who will never understand why their loved ones died? Does it make you want to stop? Danny thought about the refugee station, about the children who would grow up and have families of their own because of what they had done tonight, about the parents who would see their kids graduate, get married, have dreams, all because 6 people had been willing to walk into hell. No, he said. It makes me want to keep going until I can't anymore. Cade nodded. She understood. They all understood. That was why they had volunteered for this life. Not for glory or recognition, but because someone had to do it. Someone had to be the shield that protected the innocent from the darkness. The ship flew on through the silent void, carrying its wounded cargo toward home. Behind them, the Vexari Empire had suffered its first major defeat in a century. Ahead of them, new battles waited. The legend of the ghost soldiers would spread. Stories would be told and dismissed. Enemies would laugh at the propaganda, and victims would pray that it was true. And in the shadows between stars, the real ghosts would keep working. 3 days after the battle, the Galactic Council assembled once more. The mood was different this time. Relief had replaced fear. Victory had replaced despair. Representatives who had been preparing for the worst now celebrated an outcome none of them had expected. Ambassador Lyra Venn stood at the speaker's platform, her silver skin glowing with satisfaction. The Vexari fleet has retreated to their home territory. Intelligence reports indicate significant leadership losses aboard their command carrier. Their expansion has halted for the first time in decades. Applause filled the chamber. Species that had been enemies for centuries smiled at each other. The impossible had happened. They had won. High Counselor Zethrak raised his hand for silence. This is indeed cause for celebration. However, I must ask a question that troubles me. How did this victory occur? Our fleet was 3 days away. The civilian station had no defenses capable of stopping the Vexari. Yet somehow, the enemy command carrier was destroyed. Their weapons were disabled, and their leadership was eliminated. How? The chamber grew quiet. Everyone had been asking the same question. The official reports made no sense. A massive warship had simply torn itself apart from internal explosions. 40 enemy officers had been found dead throughout the vessel. The war marshal himself had been killed on his own bridge. Ambassador Venn turned to Commander Jack Morrison. "Commander, do you have any information that might explain these events?" Jack stood slowly, his expression blank. "I'm afraid I don't, Ambassador. Perhaps the Vexari suffered a catastrophic engineering failure. Perhaps there was internal conflict among their leadership. I'm sure your intelligence services will determine the truth eventually." "A convenient series of accidents," Venn said, her tone suspicious. "All occurring at exactly the moment needed to save the civilian station." "The galaxy is full of coincidences," Jack replied simply. Zethrak watched the exchange with knowing eyes. He had lived long enough to recognize a lie, and he had lived long enough to know when not to pursue the truth. Whatever had really happened, the humans clearly intended to keep it secret. And perhaps that was for the best. "I suggest we accept our good fortune and move forward," Zethrak said. "The Vexari threat remains. We should use this opportunity to strengthen our defenses." The council agreed, and the session continued with discussions of fleet movements and diplomatic strategies. Jack Morrison returned to his seat in the corner and said nothing more for the rest of the meeting. On the civilian station Harmony 7, life slowly returned to normal. The refugees began the long process of rebuilding their lives. Children played in the corridors, their laughter replacing the screams of terror from days before. Parents held their families close and tried not to think about how close they had come to losing everything. A young boy named Thomas sat by an observation window, drawing pictures with colored pencils. His mother looked over his shoulder and saw what he had created: dark figures standing against a field of stars, protecting a small station from giant ships. "What are you drawing?" she asked. "The Shadow Angels," Thomas said. "They saved us from the bad aliens." "Shadow Angels?" Some of the other kids said they saw them. Soldiers dressed in black who came from nowhere and saved everyone. They said the soldiers moved like ghosts and disappeared before anyone could thank them. His mother smiled sadly. "That's a nice story, sweetheart. But I think it was probably just the council fleet that saved us." "No," Thomas insisted with the certainty of childhood. "It was the Shadow Angels." "I know it," he continued drawing, adding more detail to the dark figures. 6 of them stood together, facing an army of enemies without fear. His mother watched him work and felt something strange in her heart. Something like hope mixed with mystery. Maybe her son was right. Maybe there were angels watching over them from the shadows. Back on Earth, in a facility that appeared on no map, 4 wounded soldiers were covered in a medical bay. Danny sat beside Sam's bed, watching his friend sleep. Kate was in the next room, staring at the ceiling while her ribs healed. Laura typed a mission report that would be classified at the highest level and never seen by anyone outside their division. A memorial service had been held for Ben Howard. No body to bury, no grave to visit. Just a small ceremony in a room underground, attended by people whose names were erased from every database. His daughter would receive a letter explaining that her father had died in service to humanity. She would never know the details. She would never know that he had saved 40,000 lives with his sacrifice. That was the hardest part of this life. Not the danger, not the wounds, not the impossible missions. The hardest part was the silence. The families who would never understand. The victims who would never know their saviors' names. The history books that would never record their deeds. Danny's communicator buzzed. A new message from command. He read it and sighed. Another mission. Another crisis. Another group of innocent people who needed help that no one else could provide. He stood and walked to Kate's room. She looked up as he entered. "Already?" she asked. "Already." Kate closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them, the exhaustion was still there. But so was something else. The same determination that had carried her through 20 years of impossible operations. "Give me 2 hours to get my gear," she said, far away. In the Galactic Council headquarters, Ambassador Lyra Venn sat alone in her office. The celebration was over, the speeches were finished, but her curiosity remained unsatisfied. She accessed classified human military records through diplomatic channels. Most files were routine: fleet compositions, training programs, equipment specifications. Nothing unusual. Nothing that explained what had happened. Then she found a single file, buried deep in archives that should not have been accessible. It was labeled simply, Nightfall Division. She opened it. Inside was a single line of text. Status, mythological. No other information. No personnel lists. No mission records. No evidence that it had ever existed at all. Venn stared at the screen for a long time. Then she looked out her window at the distant star that was Earth's sun. Such a small, unremarkable star. Such a young, unremarkable species. And yet, she closed the file and decided not to pursue the matter further. Some mysteries were better left unsolved. Some legends were more powerful when they remained legends, but she would never again underestimate the humans. And she would never again sleep quite as soundly, knowing that somewhere in the darkness between stars, something was watching. Something that protected the innocent and punished the guilty. Something that moved like shadows and left no trace. The galaxy would continue to doubt. They would call the stories exaggeration, propaganda, fairy tales told to frighten enemies. They would laugh at the idea of human ghost soldiers and dismiss the eyewitness accounts as hysteria. And humanity was content to let them believe that, because myths did not need supply lines. Myths did not need political approval. Myths did not need to explain themselves to councils or ambassadors or anyone else. Myths simply appeared when the innocent needed them most, and disappeared before anyone could prove they were ever real at all. In a ship with no name, flying toward a destination that existed on no map. 4 soldiers prepared for their next mission. They did not do this for glory or recognition. They did not do this for medals or promotions. They did it because they were human. And humans protect their own.